So good morning, everyone. I'm happy to be with you and share what we are doing in the Lenfoma Coalition. You already heard the name of my presentation. So I just want to start with saying, if you want to achieve your goal, do not focus on them. So that goes against everything we know that's ever said about setting goals. So whenever, wherever anyone is talking about goals, they say you have to pick up what's on your mind that's going to do and write it down, set your goal, have a sort of checklist, go over and over and again, and then you achieve your goal. Actually, I learned that this is not how we are going to achieve our goals through the course of my life. As a doctor, as a patient, and as a caregiver. So I have three hats, so I can see the issue from different perspectives. So we're talking about patient empowerment. And I was in the professional field since 25 years. And in 15 years, I'm in the advocacy world. And we're still talking about empowering patients. And yet, not results that we are convinced that we're at the final stage. The reason is that we always say that patients are at the center of everything, but we don't have a common understanding of the stakeholders that we are having the patient centricity. So this is, as everybody knows, Albert Einstein. In 1947, he was giving lectures at the University of Oxford, and after an examination, he was just walking with his assistant, and the assistant was a little bit shocked. And he said, he turned to Professor Albert Einstein and said, "Professor, excuse me of saying this, but you have asked the same questions last year to the same class. Is there a mistake?" Einstein said, "No, it's the same questions." "But how come?" The assistant said, "I mean, you have asked the same questions." Einstein replied, "The questions were the same, but the answers changed." It is the same for patient centricity. So what we know of back in 2 decades in terms of patient centricity is not the same as we understand today. So as Lenfoma Coalition, we decided to redefine the patient centricity. I'm just going to go over the terminology. Patient centricity is engaging individuals diagnosed with lymphoma and their caregivers in all aspects of their care, tailoring support with the understanding that every patient is unique with a different set of emotions, and that needs to be changed over time. Giving the lymphoma patients and those close to them a voice so that the focus of their care and their needs are included throughout the shared decision-making process. A willingness to listen and hear the persons affected by lymphoma in a way that respects their input, their dignity, and their intelligence and capacity for making informed decisions about their care and impact on their life. And finally, patient organizations are included as active partners and conduit of the patient needs at every stage of patient care development, including psychosocial, clinical, research, protocol development, and ultimately being seen as an integral supportive service for patients and caregivers. So as you can see, the patient centricity as a block is held by these columns: inclusiveness, partnering, sharing goals, transparency, and empowerment. And what's missing is the golden circle. As everybody knows what they're doing, but some know how they're doing, and very little know why they're doing what they're doing. A couple of years ago, when I was flying long distance, I got this book, and this is a very good book by Marshall Goldsmith, saying that what got you here won't get you there. That means that we're doing the advocacy to empower patients, but what we did in the previous year won't get us to the next level. So Lymphoma Coalition is a umbrella force of 48 countries and 71 members, established in 2002 but incorporated in 2010. We are not actually dealing with the individual patients, but the patient organizations in general in different countries. We have patient leaders in all blood cancers. We share best practice and resources. We actually think globally but act locally. We have 650,000 plus database, so we can diffuse the information very easily through our connections. So we exist to transform the lymphoma landscape, ensuring patient centricity is defined by people affected by lymphoma to improve patient outcomes across all health system decisions. So we have a couple of resources that the Lymphoma Coalition has created, a robust, high-value resources and assets that have currently been underutilized. That's a patient survey that I'm going to talk to you in a couple of minutes. Reports, data collection, library resources, standards of excellence. This one is still in the process of developing. Awareness campaigns and digital assets. We also have a Life app. I'm not going to go into the details of the Life app because everybody, I mean, it's trendy to have a Life app, and it's difficult. It's very expensive and difficult to maintain, but I would like to have your feedbacks on this at the end, if it's possible. We have a Lymphoma Coalition resource library where we get RSS feeds, more than 100 pieces in different topics like regulatory and reimbursement funding, diagnostic therapies, press releases, abstracts, and lymphoma articles, and variety of other things. We have this Lymphoma Coalition global database. And in this database, you can search therapies by countries, by region, by the therapy itself, by the trade names, by the approval status. A stands for approved, and T for clinical trials. You don't see any P here, but P for pending, W for withdrawal, etc., etc. Regulatory status and reimbursement status is very important as well, that you can sort out with the filters. Apart from that, you get the country demographics in this database, as well as the lymphoma statistics like incidence, mortality, and prevalence, and those kind of things by country and by region. And that's very helpful also for the stakeholders like healthcare professionals and the industry. So you can, as you see, compare within the country or between countries. For example, in Germany, you have more than 100 therapies reimbursed for lymphoma, whereas in Serbia, you have half of it. So, I mean, physically, those two countries are not very far away from each other, but in one country, the lymphoma patients are privileged to have at least 2 times more therapies available. When you look at the number of approved and reimbursed therapies, actually a true measure of access is not the approved therapies. You can see in all of these countries, most of the drugs available are approved, but when you have to look for the true measurement of access to the reimbursement, which is the light blue thing. And in Latvia, there's a big difference that also shows how healthy of the healthcare system in that country, because there's a huge gap between approved therapies with reimbursed therapies. You know that we have more than 80 subtypes in lymphoma, and you can see the subtype therapies in our global database. You can sort out the clinical trials in each country. We're hoping to have the Greek data very soon with our colleagues coming into Lymphoma Coalition, but I'm not going to go into details of this. But the only sad thing is that the number of clinical trials being written in the United States exceeds the sum of all European clinical trials. And that's a very sad thing for the European lymphoma patients. So Lymphoma Coalition and its members are well positioned to be the voice of lymphoma patients worldwide, sharing the patient perspective with all the stakeholders. Actually, we're sort of bridging between the stakeholders because the patients are in the middle, are at the center of everything. But as an Oxford professor saying, patients are the most underestimated resources in the healthcare system of all times. So we're dealing with the patients, but we're not getting information from the patients as much as we could, which could save a lot of time and energy and money, of course. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about the global service that we do every second year. We started doing this global service firstly in 2008. And in 2016, we had more than 4,000 respondents, and nearly 3,000 patients responded from Europe. And when you look at the several feedbacks that I'm going to summarize here, for example, the physical concerns that affect negatively the quality of life of the lymphoma patients, fatigue is the most frequent. There are, of course, other things that also affect the quality of life, but not as much as fatigue. Factors affecting well-being is mostly the most frequent is fear of relapse, but all of these things are unmet needs because neither the healthcare professionals nor the service around the patient are aware of this problem and then helping with the patients. The medical concerns is diverse, from diabetes to stomach-related issues and numbness. We need to look at the barriers to the treatment in order to position ourselves to cope and overcome these barriers. The barriers are personal, waiting time, access to treatment, access up to time treatment, financial, caregiver, and several others. So how to support the patient? The primary source of information should be a reliable one, and the patients go back to their doctors and ask information that we see the most frequent. But the thing is that 60% of our patients go to their doctors and ask information, but 70% of this 60% are not very happy with the information they get from their doctors. So there's a sort of miscommunication, actually. It's not the doctors are giving the wrong information. It's not that there's a gap of communication between the patient and the healthcare professionals. So in a hospital setting, there are a lot of support services around the patient. And as you can see at the bottom, patient organization support is one of the most prominent service that patients are utilizing, apart from the others, including the spiritual support in many hospitals. So our members are not homogeneous. I mean, some members are doing only online work, some are going on site, and some are doing both, and those are the diverse services that Lymphoma Coalition members, 71 members, are serving to their individual patients. Relationship with healthcare professionals should improve. That's what we thought. That's the reason we intended to develop a standard of excellence program, but through this program, it's not only the communication between healthcare professionals, but among all the stakeholders should be improved.